Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Tutorlini Test Prep. My name is Kyle. I am a test prep professional and I've been tutoring SAT for over 3 years. I also scored an 800 on the SAT Math section twice now. Today I will be providing a full walkthrough of the digital SAT Math practice test number 3. Let's get started with Module 1. Okay, so question 1 of Module 1. So it gives us this equation. It says t is the time, and it wants to know 2 seconds after passing the marker. So that tells us that t is equal to 2. So we're going to do d equals 30t. D equals 30 times 2. And we get d equals 60 feet. And that is answer choice C. Okay, so whenever you see, for question 2, whenever you see x equals 0, that's the y-intercept. Whenever you see y equals 0, it's an x-intercept. And whenever you see x equals 0, it's a y-intercept. So for this one, we know that b is equal to 14 because that point 0, 14 is the y-intercept. And it says the slope is 1/9. Okay, that's it. Now we can just plug it into slope-intercept form, mx plus b, 1/9 x plus 14. Okay, that is it. That's it for the second one. All right, for this one, this one could be a little tricky. So what you can do is, do you see how the 8 over x is just the x over 8, but upside down? So what we can do is, to make it upside down, a lot of people don't know this, you can actually reciprocal both sides, and that is a valid algebra operation. So 5 you could write as 5 over 1, if that helps you visualize it. And now we flip both sides, or raise it to the -1 power. Both those mean the same thing. So we get 8 over x equals 1/5. And the answer is 0.2 or 1/5. You don't have to put both of them. I'm just writing them so that you know what the acceptable answers are. Just write one. If you didn't see that, what you could have did was you could have multiplied both sides by 8 and found x is 40. And then you could have plugged in 8 over x equals 8 over 40. And then if you simplify that, and you can simplify it on your calculator or on Desmos as well. Maybe I'll show you how to do that really quick. So let's see, 8 divided by 40. And it says 0.2, and if I press this button here, it says 1/5. So either of those would have been acceptable. As you see, the second method, it kind of takes a little bit longer. So it's better, it's kind of like almost an algebra shortcut. You're kind of better off if you can just figure out what the shortcut is early on. So try to be creative. All right, so we have a congruency statement. So remember, the order in which the letters come in tell you the angles and that correspond. So A corresponds to D, B corresponds to E because they both come second, and C corresponds to F because they both come third. So I'm going to make 2 right triangles here. And remember, it says B and E are right angles, so it's really important that you put those as the right angles. ABC, and DEF. And it says A is 18. So angle D corresponds to A. So D is equal to A, so we can put 18. And then the two acute angles in a right triangle add up to 90. So we can really quickly do 90 minus 18 to get angle C. So 90 minus 18. Do that on a calculator and we get 72. So if this guy is 72, then F is also 72 because they correspond. So angle F is equal to 72 degrees. So we found all the angles in both triangles. And we found that F is 72 degrees. And that is the answer to number 4, B. Okay, so for this one, it's testing us on the rule of exponents, that if you multiply by a common base, you add the exponent. So see how the thing on the bottom, we call that the base, is both x. So when that's the case, we can rewrite it as that base raised to the sum of the power. So 2 plus 3 is 5. I'll do another one really quick. So 4 to the 8 times 4 squared, 8 plus 2, okay, so is equal to 4 to the 10. So we're going to combine the m's, we're going to combine the q's, and we're going to combine the z's. So, and again, anytime you don't see a power written, the implied power is 1. So I'm going to put a little 1 above this m. Okay, so we're going to do the m's. M to the 4th times m to the 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. Okay. Then q's. Okay, q to the 4 times q to the 5th. 4 plus 5 is 9. And then z to the negative 1 times z cubed. So negative 1 plus 3 is 2. So it's m to the 5th, q to the 9, z squared, which is answer choice B. All right, let's keep going. All right, so the box plot, really important. All you got to know about box plots on the SAT. This guy is the median. This guy is the min. This guy is the max. And then each of these little quarters here contains 25% of the data. And for any question, but especially these ones, you have to know that range equals max minus min. This is pretty much all you need to know about box plots. So why don't we use, I don't know, group 2 as an example, just to go over this stuff. So you see the median is 24. The range is max minus min, so 28 minus 22, which is 6. And then let's say I said, how many data points are from 23 to 28? That would be 3/4, so 75%. Anyway, so anytime you see a box plot, they're 9 times out of 10, they're going to ask you, what's the median? What's the range? Or they're going to ask you, what percent of the data points is from this point to this point? And even that's kind of a rare question. So the vast majority of the time, they're going to ask you, what's the median or what's the range? Okay. So notice for this one, for these two answer choices, it talks about the mean. You cannot determine the mean from a box and whisker plot or box plot. So kind of just by definition, A and B are wrong. Okay, so now I want you to compare the medians. So remember, the medians are the line in the middle of the box. So the first median is here, the second median is here. So as you can see, the median of group 1 is 25, and the median of group 2 is 24. So the median of 1 is greater than the median of group 2. And that is answer choice C. So yeah, as you can see, box plots, there's not that much going on. It's just most kids forget this or they don't learn it in school. So please, please, please make sure you pause the video, jot this down, and make sure you understand how to read the box plot, because this is not a question you want to get wrong for sure. Okay, so 6 is C. Let's keep going. Okay, this is a system of equations. So they just want us to solve a system of equations. So very first thing we should be thinking is, let's just go to Desmos. So we're going to plot y equals 76 and y equals x squared minus 5. And I'm going to use the scroll wheel to zoom out. Then I'm going to use the scroll wheel to zoom back in, and you'll see there are two solutions. Okay, and the two possible x values are -9 and 9. Okay, that wasn't so bad. So the x values are -9 and 9. So we see that the only one that could be an answer choice, there is no +9, so it must be -9. Great. Now I'll go over how to do it by hand. Any kind of standard system of equations question like this, I mean, I wouldn't even bother doing it by hand. As you see, Desmos can get us the answer incredibly quickly. So I see I got y by itself for both of them, so I'm going to substitute for y. In other words, I'm just going to set them equal. So x squared minus 5 equals 76. Now, there's no x term, so instead of getting all the terms to one side, I'm going to get the square by itself and then take the square root. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides, and I get x squared equals 81. And now I take the square root of both sides, and remember, when you take the square root of a square in an equation, you have to remember to slap on a plus or minus in front of it. So see, we also find that x is positive or -9, and that would also give us b. But again, it's like the Desmos, doing it with Desmos is just a lot faster and a lot more reliable. So I'm just showing you for the sake of it so that you can build up your algebra skills for the harder questions. I really don't think you should do this question by hand. Desmos was much easier, even though this was a short one. Okay, great. Let's keep going. All right, so these questions can really mess with people. They didn't they've been asking these a lot on these practice tests. So this question is asking you about what's called a confidence interval. So the confidence interval tells you what values is the population proportion, what values are plausible for the population mean or the population proportion. Okay, so the confidence interval is the point estimate plus or minus the margin of error. So this is like, it's not really an equation, but it's something you have to know for the exam. So the point estimate is the sample proportion or the sample mean. Okay, and you see this one, they took a random sample from a population and they figured out the proportion So for this one, the point estimate is the sample proportion, which again is like, it's like the proportion of the people that you asked for, right? Why don't I just do a quick example? So let's say, I don't know, we ask what percent of people is going to vote for 100 people. What percent of them are going to vote for presidential candidate A? And we found out 52% of them are. So the point estimate would be 0.52. And then let's say the margin of error was 0.05. So that would give us 0.47 to 0.57. So the sample proportion, the 100 people you asked, there's 52% of them are going to vote for presidential candidate A. But out of the population, so let's say this was out of all the people in New York, then the 100 people were selected from people in New York. So we would say out of all the people in New York, the population, it could be anywhere, plausibly anywhere from 47% to 57% vote for presidential candidate A. So that's kind of what the confidence interval is saying. I hope that quick example helps you. You can also do this with a mean. It doesn't have to be a proportion. So let's say, I don't know, the average weight of some dogs is like 30 pounds, and then you have a margin of error of like 2 pounds. You would do 30 plus or minus 2. Okay, anyway. So the point estimate here is 0.49. That's the sample proportion. And then the margin of error, it tells us, is 0.04. So we're going to do 0.04. And then you can just do this in your calculator really quick. 0.49 minus 0.04 is 0.45. And 0.49 plus 0.04 is 0.53. So the confidence interval is 0.45 to 0.53. And now right away, you kind of see the only one that even mentions both those numbers is A. So you really didn't even need to interpret it that well. But as I told you, it tells you that it is plausible that the proportion is between 0.45 and 0.53. So I don't know if this were if we put this as a percentage, we would say it is very likely that the population proportion is between 45% and 53%. It doesn't describe what they're doing. I don't know. It's about 50, so this might be a voting context. I'm not sure. It's about 50-50. I'm not sure, but hopefully that clears things up. Again, you really need to know this formula here. And then you really need to understand how to interpret this guy here. And remember what I said. It's the population proportion. It's the plausible values for the population proportion or the population mean, depending on which problem you're doing. Okay, so 8 is A. All right, another systems of equations question. So even if you don't know what's going on, we can just type it into Desmos really quickly. So why don't we do that? So y equals 2x plus 10. And y equals 2x minus 1. And as you can see, the solutions, or how many points it intersects, you see it never intersects. So it intersects 0 times. So that is the answer. These are parallel, so they never cross. So they intersect 0 times. So I want to point out as well, this is a linear system. Linear systems can only have 0, 1, or infinitely many solutions. It can't have 2. So this is just kind of wrong no matter what for this one. And we just found out from the picture that it had 0 points of intersection or 0 solutions. Okay, so why don't I quickly go through this, and this will be the only time in this video that I go through this. Okay, I'm not going to write this again. So no solution, one solution, infinitely many. This is kind of how you solve these problems, at least when they're in um, slope intercept form, if you want to do this one by hand. And they're going to ask you ones where you can't, you have to know this to solve it. So make sure you know this. So no solution, they have the same slope but different y-intercepts. One solution, they have different slopes. And infinitely many, they have the same slope and the same y-intercept. So make sure you write this table down and that you have it memorized, because this comes up a lot. So this is how you would do this one by hand. You would recognize that they have the same slope 2. So let me write that down, same slope. But the y-intercept of the top one is 10, and the y-intercept of the bottom one is -1. So they have different y-intercepts. So that means they have no solution based on the table, right? So it says same slope, different y-intercept for no solution. So again, I highly recommend you pause this video and write this down. So this means there's no solution or no points of intersection. So another way to say no points of intersection is 0 points of intersection. So that's how you would do it by hand. Again, I think Desmos again just makes this question a lot easier. So all right, let's keep going. And the answer was A, right? Yep. All right, let's do 10. Okay, this one would actually be much easier on the graphing calculator, especially if you have a graphing calculator program like the Panda College Panda SAT program that can do um, 2 points to a line. So I'm going to show that to you guys right now, and then I'll show you how to do it by hand. You really do need to know how to do it by hand just in case, but like I said, whenever we're doing the test, we like to try to think about what's the fastest way to do it, right? What's the fastest, most reliable way to do it? Okay, so I'm going to open up the Panda SAT program, and I'm going to go to lines, and I'm going to go to 2 points, and I'm going to type in 0, 2, and then 8, 34. And you see it tells me the equation is y equals 4x plus 2. Wow, that was really nice. Okay, so the graphing calculator tells me it's y equals 4x plus 2. And that is answer choice C. Okay, great. Wow. That would have taken us, if you had a calculator program like that, this would have taken you about 10 seconds. Okay, so let's go over how to do it by hand now. So first, you should recognize always, whenever you have x is 0, that's the y-intercept. So for this guy, b equals 2, because the y-intercept is 2, and b is the y-intercept, the y-coordinate of the y-intercept. Now we do the slope formula to find the slope, and then we're done. So this is y2 34 minus 2 over 8 minus 0. Okay, that is 32 over 8, which is 4. So now mx plus b, so y equals 4x plus 2. So as you can see, you get the same thing, but again, a little bit faster, a little bit more reliable if you used the graphing calculator. So 10 is C. Okay, for this one, little tricky. What I did was I recognized that these are both 4. So I could substitute, so I could set them equal. So x over y equals 24x over ny. And then I cross multiplied. So x times, so this way, and then this way. So nxy equals 24xy. So for this equation to be true, n must be equal to 24. As you can kind of see, they're kind of both in front, and the thing that comes after is the same, right? You could also divide both sides by xy, and you would just get n equals 24, however you want to think about it. Okay, so the answer is 24. Great, let's keep going. So what's the volume draining from the container each second? So that should sound like a rate to you each second, kind of like in your car, you go miles per hour, and that's a rate. Each and per are very similar. So, so for this one, rate, that's asking about the slope. So if you rewrite this as negative 4t plus 300, you can more easily see that the slope is minus 4. And that means it's draining. So you're losing 4 milliliters each second. Okay. So you're losing 4 milliliters each second. So um, that would give us answer choice D. So do you see how the units say milliliters each second? So one way to write that would be milliliters per second. And see how W has units of milliliters and T has units of seconds. So slope always has units of y over x. In this case, W over T. And in this case, that's milliliters per second. So you see how right away they're asking us for, that's another way to think about it, to figure out that they're asking for the slope. If you see units of y divided by x. Again, the word each second, that should just sound like a rate to you. And 9 times out of 10 on a linear equations question, when they're asking you for rate, you should be thinking of slope, because the slope is the rate of change. And we interpreted the slope without the negative sign. That's basically what they wanted us to do. If the volume of the tank or whatever was increasing, the slope would be positive, but it's draining, so the slope is negative. Okay, so 12 is D. Great. Okay, these can be really tricky. So I'm going to tell you. First of all, notice that it says percent. So whenever you see percent in a question like this, you have to pay attention to these words, okay? It increases by 4.9% compared to the previous year. So this tells you it's exponential. Okay? If it said something like this, percent of the original amount or the starting amount, that would be a linear function, and they always do that to try to confuse people. So they didn't do it in this one, but I just want you to be aware that just because you see a percent Doesn't mean it's necessarily exponential. 9 times out of 10 it is, but sometimes it isn't. Okay? So why we'll talk about why that is. We could talk about that more in a minute, why that is. Um but yeah, this is basically it's exponential because it says percent of the previous year. So that means that the linear ones are wrong. And then it's increasing because it says increases. So that means decreasing exponential is wrong. So that means the answer is C, increasing exponential. And this equation is of the form y equals a times b to the x. So it's y equals a, and then to figure out the percent multiplier for an increase, you multiply by 1 plus the decimal. To figure out the percent multiplier for a decrease, you multiply by 1 minus the decimal. So 0.49, we're going to divide it by 100, and we get 0.0049. Then we are going to add it to 1 to find the multiplier, so plus 1, and we get 1.0049. So this equation will look something like this: a times 1.0049 to the x. You didn't need to find that. I'm just, to answer the question, I'm just showing you, just in case this was like a follow-up question or something, right? This totally could have been another question. Okay, great. So we made a decimal, and then we did 1 plus the decimal because it's an increase. Okay, so let me talk about this kind of trick that they tend to do on the test. Um, so let's say we have 20% of the original amount, 20% increase. And then increases by 20% compared to the previous year. So let's say we both start with 100. So increasing by 20% the previous year would be 100 times 1.2, which is 120, and then times 1.2 again, which is 144, and times 1.2 again, which is 172.8. See how it's not increasing by the same amount each time? That means, and again, 20% increase, you make it a decimal, and you do 1 plus the decimal. So 0.2, 1 plus 0.2 is 1.2. That's why I'm multiplying by 1.2. So you see how that it's not changing by the same amount. One, it goes up by 20, and then it goes up by 24, and then it goes up by some other number, right? But if they said by the original amount, which they do to trick people, okay, so put this in your vocabulary. So let's say we started by 100. So 20% of 100 is 20. So we add 20, and then we add 20 again, and then we add 20 again. And as you can see, this is going up by the same amount each time. So this one is exponential when it says previous year, okay? But when it says percent of the original amount or starting amount, it's actually linear. So just please make sure you understand that they love to put this guy here on the test to confuse people, and everybody always gets it wrong. It's literally, it's the definition of a trick question. Okay. All right. Well, I hope this helps. That little, not relevant to this question, but this could be really helpful for a future question. So I wanted to help you with that. Okay, great. Let's keep going. All right, we got another system of equations. Man, this is great for Desmos. This is phenomenal for Desmos. We'll get the answer in 2 seconds in Desmos. So let's go to Desmos. So we don't even need to get y by itself. So 24x plus y equals 48. And 6x plus y equals 72. And now I'm going to zoom out. Zoom out. Oh, it intersects over here. Let's go over here. Click on it. Okay, so it's negative 1.33. Let's do that really quickly. Type in a bunch of threes. And it's negative 4/3. Okay, so negative 4/3, comma 80. Okay. So we go to Desmos. And we get negative 4/3, comma 80. So that means y equals 80. And that is the answer. Wow, that was really fast. I highly recommend using Desmos for this question. 1 second. Okay. So let's go over how to do it by hand now. So this is standard form. So we tend to want to use elimination. So we want to find y. So we want to eliminate the other letter. So we're going to eliminate x. I look at the x's, and the least common multiple of 24 and 6 is 24. So I'm going to multiply the bottom one by negative 4 so that when I add them, they go away. So we get 24x plus y equals 48, and then multiply the bottom one by negative 4, and we get negative 24x minus 4y equals negative 288. And now we're going to add these two equations. So the 24x plus negative 24x, that goes away. And we're just left with y plus negative 4y, so it's negative 3y, and then 48 plus negative 288. You could do this on your calculator. Negative 240. Divide both sides by negative 3, and you get y equals 80. Again, wasn't using Desmos far easier for this question. I mean, there's also graphing calculators that can solve these, but yeah, I think Desmos, easy peasy, because if it intersects multiple times, like on a different question, then you can see that it intersects multiple times. So that's really helpful, in my opinion. All right, let's keep going. Okay, anytime on a quadratic question you see the word minimum or maximum, you should be thinking vertex, the point on the tippy edge of the parabola. Again, we can straight up just use Desmos for this one and answer it very easily. So let's go to Desmos. Let me refresh. And the function is y equals x squared minus 14x plus 22. And it wants us to figure out the vertex. So I'm going to zoom out. Okay, so the vertex is right here. Tells me it's 7 comma negative 27. Okay, let me write that down. And it says, what value of x does it reach its minimum? So if it asked you what's the minimum, I would say the y value, negative 27. That's the default. But if it says what value of x does it reach its minimum, then it wants the x value. So for this one, that is 7. But if it asked you what's the minimum, you would say negative 27. Okay, so just make sure you understand that. If they don't specify, they want the y value. Okay. All right. So yeah, so the answer is 7. That's it. Oh my God. Like, man, Desmos is really helpful. It makes a lot of the questions almost kind of trivial, right? Okay, so how you would find the x-coordinate of the vertex by hand from standard form is you write down, okay, a equals 1, b equals minus 14, and c equals 22, ax squared plus bx plus c, right? And now we use this formula, which is really important, and you have to know it. So that's the big reason I'm going through this. Negative b over 2a. So negative 14 over 2 times 1. So I get positive 14 over 2, which is 7. So you see we get the same answer. And if you wanted to find k, you could plug in the x coordinate. So you would set x equal to 7 and plug it in here and here for this equation. And if you did that, you would still get negative 27. You could do that on a calculator, honestly. Probably much easier. And then you would still get the vertex is 7 comma negative 27. But again, if we recognize it's asking for the x coordinate, we could just kind of stop here and not do the rest, right? So the answer is 7. Again, much easier question to do on Desmos. It's still really important to understand how to find the vertex, because what if they give you one with letters in it? Then you have to do it by hand, right? But for this one, I would not do it by hand. Much easier to just graph. Okay, we got to find the intercepts. There's another one you could just do on Desmos. So h of x, you could type in h of x, or you could just write y. It doesn't matter. So y equals 4x plus 28. Okay, let me zoom out. Okay, so the x-intercept is negative 7. The y-intercept is 28. So it wants us to find, so let me write those down. So negative 7 comma 0 and 0, 28. And it wants us to add those up, a and b. So negative 7 plus 28, that equals 21. And that is the answer. Wow, Desmos is really helpful. Okay, so now if you were going to do this by hand, you first have to recognize that b is the y-intercept. So 0 comma b, or b equals 28, right? Now to find the x-intercept, we plug in, that's just because it's a linear function. You could have plugged in x equals 0 as well, and you still would have gotten 28. Now for the x-intercept, we have to plug in y equals 0. So we're going to do 0 equals 4x plus 28. Subtract 28, and we get negative 28 equals 4x. Now divide by 4, and we get x equals negative 7. And they called the x-intercept a. So you see, we still get 28 and negative 7, and then you just add them because it says a plus b, right? And you still get 21. So yeah, you could have done that by hand too. Again, I'm just trying to teach you how useful Desmos is as we go through this. Okay, great. Let's move on to 17. Okay, so this is tricky for kids. So I'm going to do my best to kind of go over this really quickly. So um, um, so you have to know this business for similar areas and similar volumes, okay? And here's what you got to know. The area scale factor is equal to the linear scale factor squared, and the volume scale factor is equal to the linear scale factor cubed. So I would take a minute, pause this, write those down. Okay. And yeah, so basically, like, how is this useful? So let's say we had a question where it was like, prism A has a volume 8 times the volume of prism B. So that means that the volume scale factor is 8. So we could now take the cube root of both sides to find the linear scale factor, and that would mean 2 is the linear scale factor. So let's say it said prism B has a side of 10. What is the corresponding side on prism A? So okay, so now you use your linear scale factor. So we're either going to multiply or divide by 2. Well, prism A is bigger than prism B, so we're going to multiply by 2. So we would do 10 times 2, and we would figure out that it's 20. So I guess what I want you to realize is, and you could do a very similar thing with area scale factor. Just remember, it's squared, not cubed. Okay. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but hopefully you kind of get the idea that you can use the ratio of one of them, of the volume scale. You could use the ratio of the sides to figure out the ratio of the volumes, or you could use the ratio of the areas to figure out the ratio of the sides, etc., etc. So these two equations, they've been asking about this a lot recently. This was actually on the October 22 test that I took. So they seem to be liking asking this a lot. Okay, anyway, so for this one, square A has side lengths that are 166 times the side lengths of square B. Okay, so side length, so that means the linear scale factor is 166. And now it's asking about area. So it basically wants you to find the area scale factor. So the area scale factor is the linear scale factor squared. So the area scale factor is 166 squared. So the area scale factor, put that in a calculator, and you get 27,556. So we could say square A is 27,556 area times the area of square B. Now be careful, if they flip-flopped it on you, you would have to reciprocal it. So if it said like the area of square B, I could totally see this being a harder question, maybe on like the module 2B. The area of square B is 1 over 27,556 times the area of square A, something like that. They don't really do that almost at all, though. So for the most part, um, it's just exactly what you think it is. But just make sure you're going in the same direction. So see how it says square A is 166 times square B. Okay. So the what next sentence says area of square A is k times square B. If it said area, if it flip flopped it and said area of square B times the area of square A, that would be in a different order. So we'd have to think about it a little bit harder. Anyway, I hope this helped. These two equations, really important. You got to understand what these mean and how to use them. All right, great. So the answer is 27556. Let's go to 18. We're almost done with the first module. Okay, what is the value predicted by the line of best fit? So what you have to understand is the actual y values are the dots, and the predicted y values, you get those from the line. So I look at 25.5. That's like here. Then I go up and maybe like circle this. And then I read it on the y-axis. And you see it's just a little bit over 8. And that would give us 8.2, which is C. So make sure you're not looking at the dots because it said predicted. If it said actual y value, then we would be looking at the dot at that point. I don't even think this x value has a dot, so you don't really need to worry about it. But anyway, yeah, you just have to read the line. So 18 is C. And again, if I highlight this just to make it a little bit more clear. Okay, great. So 18 is C. Let's keep going. Okay, so the measure of angle T is 2 pi over 3, and then it's plus 5 pi over 12 radians. Okay. So if I were you, I would just kind of ignore the pi and then do the fraction math on my calculator. So you could do it on your TI-84, you could do it on here. So 2/3 plus 5/12. Click on the little button. Okay, that's 13 over 12. Okay. So this is 13 over 12, and then we just slap a pi in front. So 13 pi over 12 radians. And now you need to convert this to degrees. So what you got to know is there's pi radians in 180 degrees, okay? It's the only conversion factor on the test, pretty much the only conversion factor on the test that they won't give you, okay? So now we do a unit conversion. So 13 pi over 12 radians, and we're gonna, okay, and we're gonna put the pi on the bottom so that the radians cancel. The radians are on opposite side of the division sign, so they cancel, which is what we want. So we're left with units of degrees, which is what we want, right? And also notice the pi's are on opposite side of the division sign, so those cancel too. So now all you got to do on your calculator is 13 over 12 times 180. So let's do that, 13 over 12 times 180. And I get 195 degrees. Great, so 19 is C. All right, let's keep going. Okay, 20. So this is an exponential function with an interval problem. So y equals a times b to the t over n. Okay. A is the starting amount, or your y-intercept. B is the growth/decay rate, what you're multiplying by. T is just time. N is the interval, how often that growth rate is being applied. Okay, so let's do a quick example. I'm not going to go into. I talked about this a lot in my last video. Practice test number 2. So let's say I started with 32 cells, or let's do 34 cells, and they double every 6 hours or something like that. So I could write 34, okay, double, that means B is 2. So starting with 34, that's A. B multiplied by 2, that's B is 2. And then every 6 hours, so T over 6. So that's kind of how you use this formula. So let's do it for this one now. So the starting amount, or the initial amount is 12,000. So this tells you A is 12,000. If you look at this and then this, that tells you that it's doubling. So B is equal to, because it's multiplied by 2, right? So B is equal to 2. And then it says it did that doubling 4 hours later. So that tells you the interval, how often it's doubling, is 4. So this equation looks like this. Y equals 12,000 2 to the t over 4. Now, for whatever reason, they want you to write this like this, okay? So they don't want you to divide by a number, they want you to multiply by a number. So you have to recognize that, I don't know why you would write it like this, but dividing by 4 is the same as multiplying by 1/4. So you just reciprocal the number you're dividing by and multiply by it. Okay, so for example, let's say n were 1/8 of an hour. So you would divide by 1/8, and then the reciprocal of 1/8, to make that look nicer, is 8. So you could write this as 8t. To me, it makes more sense to flip it when the bottom is a fraction, right? 4 is not a fraction, so I don't know. I guess they just had you flip it just to make it harder arbitrarily. But like in practice, you would probably write this as t divided by 4. I don't know. That's just kind of silly. So you see they want you to find r, so r is 1/4 if you look at the original equation. Really strange that they made us write it like that, but again, I don't know. Like I said, it's question 20, so they're just trying to make it harder for no reason. Okay, so 20 is B. So you really got to know this equation, and you got to understand what all these letters mean. Again, one more time. A is the starting / initial amount. B is the growth / decay rate. That's the number your Y values are getting multiplied by. In this case, it was 2. And N is the interval, how often they are fully getting multiplied by that number. Anyway. Okay, 20 is good. All right, man, this one, again, you can solve any equation just by graphing the left-hand side and the right-hand side and seeing where they're equal. So to me, that's the easiest way, so that's what I'm going to do. So let's go to Desmos. And I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to type in y equals the left-hand side. So square root x minus 2 squared. And then I'm going to do y equals square root 3x plus 34. I'm going to zoom out. All right, they intersect in 2 spots. Okay, the x values are -3 and 10. Let me write that down. X equals -3 and 10. The smallest solution, so the smallest one is -3. So that's our answer, -3. Wow, that took about 10 or 15 seconds with Desmos. See how took about 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, so let's go over how to do it by hand. Okay, so just give me 1 sec. All right, so by hand, you see we got square roots on both sides, right? So we're going to square both sides. And we get X minus 2 squared equals 3x plus 34. And then we get, if we expand the left-hand side, you do x minus 2 times x minus 2, and you FOIL. And if you do that, you should get x squared minus 4x plus 4. Now we're going to get everything to one side. So we're going to subtract the 3x and the 34 over. So we get x squared minus 7x, and then we get 4 minus 34 is minus 30 equals 0. And then we get, if we factor this, you get x minus 10, x plus 3. Write two numbers that add to minus 7 and multiply to minus 30. So negative 10 plus 3 is negative 7. And multiply to minus 30. So negative 10 times 3 is minus 30. And now we set each of them equal to 0. So x minus 10 equals 0. That gives you x equals 10. And this one gives you x equals negative 3. And the smaller solution is negative 3. Okay, wow, that took a really long time. Okay, I think graphing this one on Desmos was much easier. As you can see, so many of the questions just become trivial if you know how to click and type. So, all right, this one might not seem like it, but because it's multiple choice, we can use Desmos for this one as well. So it says a is greater than 30. So I'm going to set a equal to 40. And then I'm going to plot the left side and plot the right side. So let's do that on Desmos. So y equals x minus 29, the left side, and then y equals the right side. So x minus a, so remember we set x equal to 40. And then x minus 29. And now we're going to see where they intersect. So again, I'm using the scroll wheel to do this really quickly. Okay, so they intersect at x equals 29 and x equals 41. So x equals 29 and x equals 41. Okay, so if a is 40, that means this one's 40, a plus 1, this one's 41, and this one's 29. So as you can see, these two match my answers, but this one does not. So it must be 2 and 3. So that is answer choice C. Wow, see? Even, this might be the hardest question on the whole section, and if we just pick a number for A, we can guess and check very easily if it's multiple choice. If this were a grid-in, you'd pretty much have to do this. If this were for response, you'd pretty much have to do this one by hand. Okay, so now let's talk about how to do it by hand. So what we do is we're going to subtract x minus 29 from both sides. And we get 0. And we get x minus a, x minus 29, and then minus x minus 29 equals 0. So you see I kind of just moved this guy over to the other side using subtraction. Okay, now we can rewrite this. X minus a, x minus 29, minus 1 x minus 29. Now, notice how they both have x minus 29s? So you can factor it or combine the like terms, however you want to think about it. Um, so like for example, I don't know, 5x minus 29s minus 2x minus 29s. That's 3x minus 29s. I hope that kind of makes sense. I think if you understand this one, it'll help with the harder one. So see how they're the same? So we can kind of like combine the like terms. So 5 minus 2 is 3. So that's what we're going to do here. So x minus a, x minus 29's minus 1, x minus 29 would give us x minus a minus 1, x minus 29. So now you set these guys equal to 0. So x minus 29 equals 0. So x equals 29. And then you set this other one equal to 0, x minus a minus 1 equal to 0. Add a to both sides, and then add 1 to both sides. And you get x equals a plus 1, and x equals 29. Still, wow, that was really hard, right? Wasn't just guess and check much easier for this one? So you see, now, if you picked a equals like 5 or something, that wouldn't work, because remember, it says a has to be greater than 30. So make sure when you pick a number for a, you pick a valid one. So like 31, 32, 100, something like that. Okay. But yeah, I mean, guess and check. Man, I did that problem in 30 seconds. And then this one, I only did this one so fast because I've already done it and I have it written down. Like, doing this authentically in the heat of the moment in like 2 minutes would be really hard. You'd have to be really good at algebra to get this right doing it this way. Anyway, so yeah, if it's multiple choice, even if there's letters in it, you could still use Desmos to guess and check a lot of the time. All right, wow, that was a tricky one. Okay, that is it for module 1. Now at this point in the video, we will begin module 2A. If you don't care about module 2A and you want to skip to module 2B, you can look in the chapters below and skip straight to module 2B. Okay, question 1, 10% of 470. So anytime you do a percent of, what you do is you change their percent to a decimal by dividing by 100. So I go on my calculator, 10 divided by 100, that's 0.1. And then you change the of to multiplication. So times 470. Now I type in my calculator 0.1 times 470, which is 47. So the answer to this one is 47. Okay, for this one, it says how many students chose activity 3. So we're going to look at activity 3, and we're going to look at the bar, and you see it's somewhere between 35 and 40, kind of towards the higher end. 40, maybe it's like 38, 39. And you see the only one that's even close to whatever that number is 39. So 2 is B. Okay, even this one, I'll go over it just for the sake of it. You really should know how to solve this equation, but just to show you how powerful Desmos is, we can do this on Desmos as well. So you do y equals 4x plus 5, y equals 165. You zoom out, and you see where they intersect. And they intersect at x equals 40. So Desmos x equals 40. So how you do this one by hand is you want to get the x by itself. So there's a 5 and a 4. So you always move the farthest thing first. So you see how the 5 is farther away? So we're going to move the 5 first. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And we get 4x equals 165 minus 5, 160. And now the 4 is multiplied by the x. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. And we also get x equals 40. So you see, any equation on the test, you don't need to know how to do it. You can just graph it on Desmos. So okay, so they were $3 per pound. So that means he spent 3x. So $3 per pound times x, where x is the number of pounds, would give us the number of oranges, right? Like dollars per pound times pound. You see how those would cancel, and we would get dollars, right? So this is equal to the dollars, which is 27. Okay, now to solve this equation, 3 times x, so we divide by 3, that's the opposite of multiplication, and we get x equals 9. Great. Okay, so it says what value of x is f of x equals 8, so we're going to replace f of x with 8, and we get 8. You could also just graph both of these if you wanted to. 8 equals 4x. We're going to divide both sides by 4. And we get 2 equals x, or x equals 2. Let me make sure that's right. Yep. Same thing here. So it says g of x equals 25. So we're going to replace the g of x over here with 25. And we get 25 equals x squared plus 9. And we're going to try to get this. There's no x term, so we're going to try to get the square by itself. So to do that, we're going to subtract 9 from both sides. We get 16 equals x squared. Now we take the square root of both sides to get rid of the square. And we get x equals, and remember when you take the square root of a square in an equation, you got to slap on a plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus 4. And the only one that looks like that is A. If you wanted to, you could go to Desmos and you could graph y equals x squared plus 9 and y equals 25, and then find the points of intersection, and you'll find that the x values are 4 and negative 4. Great. Okay, what is the y-intercept? So that's the point where it crosses the y-axis, and all y-intercepts have an x value of 0. So right away, I see that A and B do not have x values of 0, so they are wrong. Now I look at the picture, and I see that the y-intercept is 8. So the x-coordinate is 0, so it is 0, 8. And that is answer choice D. Okay, Sean rents a tent, $11 per day. Okay, so this is a rate. So this tells you slope. And then the flat fee or the one-time fee, however you want to call it, that tells you the y-intercept, okay? So y equals mx plus b, m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. In this problem, you can tell by looking at the answer choices that c is y and d is x. Okay, so the slope is 11. And the one-time fee, the y-intercept, is 10. So it is 11d plus 10. And that is answer choice C. So whenever you see each day or per day, it's probably telling you the slope, right? And if you see initial, starting, one time, flat fee, that's usually a y-intercept. So these are some key words that you should be familiar with. Great. Okay, I'm gonna show you how to do this one using guess and check on Desmos. Um, so let's do that. Any equivalent expressions question you can solve like this. So we're first going to do y equals 4 divided by 4x minus 5 minus 1 over x plus 1. And then if we plot the other ones, it should look exactly like that and change color. So let's do 1 over x plus 1 4x minus 5. Okay. So right away, you see they're not the same, right? The red and blue are in different spots. Okay. Let's do the other. Let's do B. 3 over 3x minus 6. They're in different spots. See how they look different? So they're not the same. Okay. Negative 1 over x plus 1, 4x minus 5. Okay, that's in different spots too, so that's wrong. Let's try answer choice D. So 9 over x plus 1, 4x minus 5. Oh, you see how the blue, watch, if I press this button, you see how the blue perfectly replaces the red? That means they're equivalent. That's your answer. So the answer is D. Okay, so you really should know these fractions, how to do it by hand, and that was a lot of typing, but if you get good at the typing, this is probably faster than doing it by hand and more reliable too, because you don't have to worry about making a mistake as long as you can type. So, all right. So these two factors cannot be factored and they have nothing in common. So that means that the least common multiple, or the least common denominator, is just those two things multiplied together. So we now want to get both those denominators to have the LCD. So the first one, we're going to multiply by x plus 1 over x plus 1, because that's the one that he's missing. And you have to multiply the top and bottom by that thing, okay? You got to multiply the top and bottom too. And then the other one is missing 4x minus 5. So we're going to multiply him by 4x minus 5 over 4x minus 5. Okay, so we have x plus 1, 4x minus 5, minus x plus 1. Okay, so 4 times x plus 1, 4x, and then 4 times 1 is 4, so 4x plus 4. And then 1 times 4x minus 5 is just 4x minus 5. So now you can combine them because they have the same denominator. And okay, so now remember, you have to distribute this minus sign. Okay. So we get 4x minus 4x, which goes away, but then you also get 4 minus negative 5. So most people would have put negative 1, which is C. But if you distribute the minus sign, you see it's 4 minus negative 5, which is 4 plus 5, which is 9. So it's 9 over x plus 1 times 4x minus 5. If you these questions are not easy, okay? If you struggle with these, you really should just do it using the guess and check method I just showed you. Okay. Now, that being said, what if this were like a grid in? Then you couldn't guess and check, right? So you probably still want to know how to do it, especially if you're going for like a 700 or higher. Anyway, let's keep going. Okay, so you see those 3 dots? So I'm going to circle those, and I'm going to write them down. So we have 0, negative 5, 1, negative 3, and 2, negative 1. Okay, now let's see which one has those. Oh, it's D. Yep. All right, that's it. Let me just zoom in properly again. Okay, great. So 10 is D. We just circled the points that they dotted for us, and then we read the XY axis. So that's it. All right, for this one, the really important thing that you got to know is that all the corresponding, when you have parallel lines, all the corresponding, if they look equal, they're equal. Top right equals top right. top left equals top left, bottom right equals bottom right, and bottom left equals bottom left, okay? So this is called corresponding angles are equal for parallel lines, okay? So there's a bunch of ways to do this. What I did was I noticed that this one equals this one. So I'm going to put, and again, the College Panda book has a really good chapter on this called Angles that goes over this really well. Okay, so I realized that this guy must be 110. And now these guys form a straight line. So that means they're supplements. They add up to 180. So x plus 110 equals 180. So if you subtract 110 from both sides, you get x equals 70. 180 minus 110. That's how you get the answer. Okay, so x is 70, and that is it. Bunch of ways to do this. To me, that was the easiest way. But you could have found the supplement first and then set them equal, or you could have did something different. Or you could have said alternate interior angles were equal, whatever. But I don't know. I always tend to fall back on the corresponding angles because I think that's the easiest to remember. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so area for a rectangle is length times width. Perimeter is 2L plus 2W. You probably want to have that memorized for the test. So the perimeter is 2 times the length, which is 4, plus 2 times the width, which is 9. And now you can just type that in a calculator, and you get 26. You also, if you wanted to, you could draw it. And, put like 9, 9, 4, 4, and then add them all up. But there are some questions where I've seen SAT questions in the past where knowing how to write the formula is essential. So I highly suggest you commit this guy to memory. I don't think it's on the formula sheet, so I highly recommend you just know it. Perimeter for a rectangle is equal to 2L plus 2W. So yeah, this was essentially just a fact check question. If you knew that formula, this question was almost no work. All right, so see how it says in terms of? Whenever it says in terms of, the thing in front of it is what you want to get by itself. So we want to get J by itself. The only thing that the J has is the 8. So we just have to move the 8. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to just divide both sides by 8. So we're going to divide this guy by 8, and we're going to divide this guy by 8. And we get J equals K plus 15M over 8. And that's it, yeah. We could split this fraction using like the butterfly method or the heart method, whatever you want to call it. But splitting it wouldn't make it any nicer because the coefficients are 15 and 1. And we would want both of those to either be simplifiable or to be divisible by 8. And neither of those are the case. So breaking it up, kind of like these other answer choices are doing, wouldn't really help us, right? If I wrote this as K over 8 plus 15M over 8, you see that doesn't really look any nicer. So now let's say it were like 8K plus 24M over 8. Then we would want to do that. Okay, 8K divided by 8. So we would get K plus 3M. That looks much nicer, right? So we would do that there. But you see for this one, because the 1 and 15 are not divisible or simplifiable via the 8, we don't do that. So we just leave it as K plus 15M over 8. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so if you wanted to, you could go to Desmos and plot the point and then plot these inequalities one by one and see if it's in the shaded region for both inequalities. That would kind of take a while though. This one might be easier to just use guess and check. So like you plug in, okay, 8 is greater than 0, 2 is greater than 0, 8 is greater than 0, 2 is less than 0, 8 is less than 0, 2 is greater than 0. And then you just check all these. So, okay, so if one of them is wrong, the whole thing is wrong. So both those are wrong. 8 is not less than 0, so that's wrong. 2 is not less than 0, so that's wrong. Okay, 8 is greater than 0, and 2 is greater than 0, so it's A. You could plot it on Desmos, but probably would be harder for this one. Probably be a waste of time for this one. But you could do that. For harder inequalities, like if it said y is greater than 8x plus 5, I would probably plot them. But yeah, anyway. Okay, so I mean, you guys can't really do this on the test, but on the paper test, I always tell kids first thing you do is draw the line of best fit. And the very first thing I say is find the slope. And I mean the y-intercept, find the y-intercept. So you see how that's like a y-intercept of about positive 10. And I'm going to highlight all the y-intercepts in yellow. So see how A and C, they have a negative y-intercept, so that can't be right. And now we look at the slope, which is here for all of them, mx plus b, right? So a positive slope goes up, and a negative slope goes down, right? So you see this one's going down, so it must have a negative slope. So even though we don't even need to calculate it, you see what I mean? It's like we could just use process of elimination. So D has a positive slope. So he's wrong. So it must be B. It's got a negative slope and a positive y-intercept. That was the case for this one. Again, you don't really need to calculate anything. You can just use process of elimination. Okay, so that was the answer to question 15. Okay. So this is like y equals a times b to the x. Kind of a weird question. So remember, a is your starting or initial amount, b is the growth / decay rate. So you see how it says initial balance? So that tells you that the keyword being initial, that tells you that A, the thing out in front, is 36,100. Okay, so let's look. B and C. B and C both have the wrong A value. Okay, so this has the wrong A. And this has the wrong A, so we can cross those out. And now, you got to remember, so in A times B to the X, we have growth or an increase when B is greater than 1. And we have decay or a decrease when 0 is less than B is less than 1. So, do you see how if you look at these two values, 36,100, and then it says later, I want you to notice that these guys got bigger, so it's an increase. You see how it got bigger? It went up. So that means it's growth. So you don't have to do any calculation. You can just recognize that this one, you see how it has a B, D has a B between 0 and 1, so that means it's decay, so it's decreasing. So this one is wrong. So it must be A. A is the only one with the correct A, and it represents an increase or growth. Exponential growth, we call that. Okay, great. So yeah, lots of numbers in there, but you see if we just use process elimination, we don't have to do any calculations. Okay, this one, if you have no idea how to do it, you can also just use Desmos. So let's do that. Any equation you can solve in Desmos. So if you're unaware, you can type in absolute value by holding down Shift and then pressing the key above Enter with the little vertical line. So that's what I'm going to do. You could also go into the function menu and click on this one, but it's probably faster to just use the keyboard. So 2, 4 minus x, plus 3, 4 minus x, equals 25. No. And then we do separately y equals 25. All right, let's zoom out. Okay, it's over here. We get this guy and this guy. Okay, so the x values, the solutions, are -1 and 9. Okay, let me write that down. So x equals -1 and 9. And it wants us to find the positive solution. And it's 9. Okay, wow, that was really quick. Okay, so let's do it by hand now. So see how these guys are the same? Kind of like we were doing before. What we can do is we can combine the like terms. So 2 plus 3 would give me 5 absolute value 4 minus x. Now we divide both sides by 5 and we get 4 minus x equals 5. So you get the absolute value by itself. Now, if the absolute value is negative, there's no solution. I went over this in my last video. If the absolute value is 0, there's one solution, and all you do is drop the bars. And if the absolute value is equal to a positive number, there's two solutions, and you have to write two equations. So one where you drop the bars, and one where you drop the bars and slap a negative onto the other side. So now if we solve both of these, add x, subtract 5, I get x equals -1. And then here I get x equals 9. So you see we still get the same answer, but Desmos might have been a little bit faster and easier. I guarantee you lots of people would not know how to solve this equation, but if you know how to type absolute value into Desmos and you know how to solve equations by graphing, like I've been showing you, all I'm doing is typing it in and zooming out, and then clicking. Takes about 10 or 15 seconds. Very helpful. All right, let's keep going. So you need to look at this, and you need to look at this. And you have to recognize what times 15 gives me 90. And the answer to that question, even if you don't realize you can use a calculator, they factored out a 6. So 6y to the fourth, 15y minus 9. Okay, let's just distribute that really quickly and make sure we got what we started with. Okay, 6 times 15 is 90. Y to the fourth times y is y to the fifth. Good. And then minus 9 times 6, that gives you minus 54 y to the fourth. Great. So we do get what we started with. And you see that r is 6. So they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't factor this all the way. Like they could have factored, you could have factored a bigger number, but they just did it like this just to make it a little bit harder, I guess. So the answer is 6. Okay, so we got to remember, and it's on the reference sheet, but you should know this: area equals length times width. So it tells you that it can be represented by W plus 9. And it tells you W is the width. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it like this: W plus 9 to make it more obvious for you guys. So see how W is the width, but the length is W plus 9. Okay. So the length is equal to W plus 9. And that's what the question is asking. It says, what's the length? So you basically just hold up the expression next to the area formula, and then you can figure it out. And again, you had to pay attention. It says W is the width. Oh, so you go, okay, I got two things multiplied together. W is the width, then the other thing must be the length, right? Okay, great. Okay, I've seen a lot of these questions now. What I would probably do is, this is what I did. I graphed them. So I graphed the inequality. You could guess and check all these points, but that would take a while, honestly. So you graph it, and then you see how all these x values are between 0 and 10? So I'm going to set the window to 0 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 10. And I think you could do that in the Blue Book version. And I'm going to set the, you see how the y values, they're all like between like 20 and 100. So I set the y window to 20 to 100. So I'll show you guys how to do that. So first we're going to type in y is greater than 13x minus 18. Then you go over to this little graph settings, and we're going to set 0 to 10. We're going to set the y values 20 to 100. Okay, so I'm not going to zoom in or anything. This looks really good. And now you can kind of just visually inspect. So, okay, so the first one has 3 comma 21. Let's look at 3 comma 21. I'm not really sure. Where's that? Let me plot it. So you see how it has a dashed line? So when you use a dashed line, that means it's not included. So 321 is on the line. So that means it's not part of the solution because it's a dashed line. If it were a solid line, it would be included. Okay, so 321, this one's out. Doesn't work. Okay, if I quickly look at it, 326 seems to work, right? 326, that's like a little bit up here, I guess. So that seems to work. But 316, that would be even lower than 21, right? So that would be below the inequality completely. It would be off the grid here. So that wouldn't work. So 316 does not work either. So let me cross that one out. Okay, so 326 works for both of them. So now we can check 552 and 542. So let's look at that. 552 and 542. I'm not really sure. It's kind of hard for me to tell. Let's look. You see 542 is not in the solution set, but 552 is. Okay. So that means that 542, this guy is wrong. And then process of elimination, this guy's right. I don't even need to check the last one. The only answer it could be is D. So that's what I would do. I don't know. I think making a picture and just kind of looking at it is easier than doing all the arithmetic. If you want, you can guess and check points and plug them in, but I think that's going to take a while. So, yeah. Okay, so this one we can also do on Desmos. So let's do that. So really important, you got to use the function notation for this one. F of x equals x plus 6, x plus 5, and x plus 1. And then we're going to do g of x equals f of x minus 1. And then you could unselect the original because it wants us to find the x-intercepts of g of x. Okay, let's label those. -5, -4, and 0. Okay. So the x-intercepts of g of x are -5, -4, and 0. And it wants you to add all those up. So -5 plus -4 plus 0, that's a -9. And that is B. Okay, if you were going to do this by hand, you'd have to understand it a lot better. So first you can find the x-intercepts of f of x just by looking at the factored form. So you're going to set each of these factors equal to 0. So x plus 6 equals 0. That gives you -6 comma 0. -5 comma 0 is the other one. And then -1 comma 0 is the other one. Now, if you ever see this on the test, f of x minus h plus k, that's telling you how much a translation to do. So you see this one, it says f of x minus 1, and then nothing on the outside, so just plus 0. So you see k is just 0, so we're going 0 units up or down. And then this one, because there's a negative sign here, we have to multiply by a -1. So h is equal to 1, so that means you're going 1 unit to the right. And you saw when we plotted the graph, it went 1 unit to the right. So to move these points, we're going to do 1 unit to the right, which is plus 1 in the x direction. So we're going to add 1 to all of them. And we get -5 comma 0 just on the x, -4 comma 0. And 0 comma 0, just like we got in the picture. And we do a plus b plus c, -5 plus -4 plus 0, and we get -9. Again, I just think it was much easier to do using the Desmos. You should know how to do it by hand as well, just in case, but yeah, I thought Desmos made this one a lot easier. All right, last question. So it says a square is inscribed in a circle. So inscribed means it's drawn within the circle. So I'm going to do my best to maybe create a really informal Not perfect, but, you know, that's pretty good. Okay, so it's inscribed in a circle. So it's inside the circle and its corners touch the edge of the circle. My drawing's not perfect, but you get the idea. So what we're going to do is, to solve this, is we're going to draw a diameter connecting the corners of the square. So the radius is 20 root 2 over 2. So that means the diameter is 20 root 2 over 2 times 2, because the diameter is twice as big, which is just 20 root 2. So what you got to know about squares with a diagonal like this, it cuts it into 45, 45, 90 triangles. So if you're not familiar with the 45, 45, 90 triangle, it's on the reference sheet, which you can find by clicking here. So it looks like this: 45, 45, S, S, S root 2. So you have 20 root 2, and do you see how 20 root 2, oops, you see how 20 root 2 is equal to S root 2? So that means S is 20. So this guy's 20, this guy's 20. So you see the side length of the square is 20. That's it. These questions can be really hard. Combined shapes. There's no set way to do them. You just have to think on your feet and be creative. And you got to know lots of formulas and special shapes and all that stuff. So just do your best. Okay, this concludes Module 2A. We will now begin Module 2B. Okay, so for this one, I would first recognize that this is your B. So B equals 4. So the y-intercept is 4. So that means 0, 4 is a point. The y-intercept always has 0. The only one with 0, 4 as a point is A. All the other ones have the wrong y-intercept. Another corresponding angles question. I just went over this earlier in the video. Basically, for this one, this guy is equal to this guy. So that means this guy is 33. And then see how this guy and this guy form a straight line? That means they're supplements. They add up to 180. So x is equal to 180 minus 33. We do that on a calculator. And we get x equals 147 degrees. Okay, that is D. All right, so, you could do part over whole times 100. Or you could use this formula: is over of equals percent over 100. So the thing next to is 75. The thing next to of is 300. And the thing next to percent is what? So we can call that x percent. Multiply both sides by 100 or cross multiply, whatever you want to do. I'll just cross multiply. So 7,500 equals 300x. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 300. Let me make sure I get the right answer. And I get 25. So 25%, which is A. Okay, so g of x equals g of x, so I'm going to substitute this into the original. You could graph it on Desmos if you want. 54 equals 6x. Divide both sides by 6. And I get x equals 9. And that is the answer, 9. F of 0, so that just means that the thing inside the parentheses is always your x. So it wants you to set x equal to 0. So we get 270 times 0.1 to the 0. Okay, I'm going to just type that in a calculator. You should know your rules of exponents, but if you're panicking on the test, please just type it in the calculator. And I get f of 0 equals 270. Which is answer choice D. Okay, this one is testing you on what's called co-function identities. So sine of theta equals cosine of 90 minus theta, and cosine of theta equals sine of 90 minus theta. So the 90 minus theta just means the complement. Complements add up to 90. So 90 minus theta is the complement of theta. So another way to write this, the acute angles in a right triangle are always complements, right? So you can similarly say sine of x equals cosine of y, and cosine of x equals sine of y. So that's another way to write this, which is really helpful for this question, okay? So RST, so it says the sum of angle R and angle S is 90 degrees. That means they're complements, and it also means they're the acute angles. So that means T must be the right angle, and R and S are the acute angles, the complements. So see how it's talking about sine R and cosine S? That's basically both of these equations. It's basically the first one, sine of x equals cosine y. So we can write sine of R equals cosine S, and sine of R is root 15 over 4, so root 15 over 4 equals cosine S. And that's it. You also could have labeled the triangle using SOHCAHTOA. So like sine of R, so this would be root 15, and the hypotenuse would be 4, and then cosine of S, and then you would do adjacent over hypotenuse. But you see, that's like a lot more work, right? So it's much faster if you can recognize that they're testing you on co-function identities. Okay, one more thing before we move on. A really common way that they test you on this is they'll do something like this. Sine of 50 equals cosine of x. What is x? So you just have to recognize whenever sine and cosine are equal, the two things inside are complements. So x is 90 minus 50, which is 40. Let's do another one. Let's say cosine of 70 equals sine of y degrees. So pause this video, see if you can do it. So we do 90 minus 70 because they have to add up to 90, and we get 20. So y would be 20 for this one. It's another very common way they test you on this. Okay, great. So, yep, sine and cosine for complements are equal. So, what's the y-intercept? So, whenever we want to find the y-intercept of the wacky equation, we plug in x equals 0. You got to know that. So, y equals -8, 2 to the 0 plus 22. Okay, now I can just type that in my calculator. -8, 2 to the 0 plus 22. And I get y equals 14, which is 0 because we plugged in x equals 0, comma 14. If you saw 14, comma 0, that would be wrong. Okay, so if you want to find a y-intercept, you plug in x equals 0. If you want to find an x-intercept, you plug in y equals 0. Okay, so you got to know both those. You also, I suppose, could have graphed this and clicked on the y-intercept on Desmos. So I'll put that. I'm not going to do it, but you could plot the function and then click on the y-intercept. This one was easier to do by hand, I think. Okay, we did this question before. I'll really quickly show you how to do this using guess and check on Desmos. So I'm going to type in the original one. And then let's say I type in answer choice B. See how they don't look the same? That means it's wrong. Okay. You can do this with all the answer choices. You can type all of them in and see that they're wrong. But answer choice D, 9 over x plus 1. See how it's exactly the same? See how the red just turned blue? See if I remove this, red turns to blue? That means they're right on top of each other. That means they're equivalent. So the answer is D. You didn't even need to know how to do it. Let's go over how to do it just in case you need to know how to do it for a harder one. So the denominators are 4x minus 5 and x plus 1. They can't be factored and they have nothing in common. So that means the least common denominator is just them multiplied together. So the least common denominator is x plus 1 times 4x minus 5. Now I'm going to get that denominator for both of them. The 4x minus 5 one is missing an x plus 1. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 1. And then this guy is missing a 4x minus 5. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 4x minus 5. So 4 times x plus 1. Distribute, you get 4x plus 4 times 1 is 4. And then 1 times 4x minus 5, that's just 4x minus 5 over x plus 1. Okay, so now they have the same denominator, so now I can combine them. Remember, you have to distribute this negative to both of them. So 4x minus 4x, that's just 0. So that goes away. But we get 4 minus negative 5, which is 4 plus 5, which is 9. So this is 9 over x plus 1, 4x minus 5. That was a lot of work. Lots of kids don't know how to do these ones. And even if you do, good chance you get nervous and you mess it up. So if this question were multiple choice, which it is, I highly recommend guess and check on Desmos. Great strategy. You see, if you get good at the typing, you can solve this question in less than a minute just by guess and check. So you could type in all of them. And you'll see the only one that perfectly replaces the original is answer choice D. Okay, great. Let's keep going. Okay, there's a bunch of ways to do this one. Remember f of x minus h plus k. So if we're moving something up 4 units, that means k is 4, and we're not moving it left or right at all, so h is 0. So g of x is equal to f of x plus 4 because k is 4. So if you go on Desmos now, you can type in f of x, and you can type in g of x equals f of x plus 4, and you can find the y-intercept very easily. So let's do that. But you did have to recognize that first concept about the function transformation. Otherwise, you can't do it this way. And then we're going to do g of x equals f of x plus 4. And just to kind of prevent confusion, I'm going to undraw the red one. And now I look at the y-intercept. Where is that? Here somewhere? And you see it's 76. So the y-intercept, or g of 0 is 0.76. We write that in function notation. G of 0 equals 76. The x value always goes in the parentheses, and the y value goes over here. So the answer is 76. You could also do it by hand. So f of x, f of 0, that would be 0 minus 6, which is negative 6, times 0 minus 2, which is negative 2, times 0 plus 6, which is 6. So f of 0 is 72. And now to move it 4 up, we add 4 to the y. So g of 0 equals 76. Again, doing it by hand was probably just as easy, but I wanted to show you both ways just so that you know. Okay, great. So, all right, so g of 0 is 76. Okay, so there's 2 equations you got to know for a cube. So if the edge length is s, okay, the volume is s cubed, and the surface area is 6s squared. I don't believe these are on the reference sheet, so you really want to know them. Okay, so the volume is s cubed. They tell us the volume is 474,552. We can solve for s by taking the cube root of both sides. So on the TI-84, to do the cube root, you press math, and then you go to option 4, cube root, and then you type in the number. On Desmos, I'm not sure how to do it on Desmos. Let's see. So, yeah, see how it says at the very bottom of this function's n root? So you could type in cube root. Probably easier to do on the T84, honestly. 474,552, and you get 78. Another thing you can do is you can recognize that the cube root is the 1/3 power, and you can type into the 1/3, and you also get 78. Doesn't matter. So moral of the story here, S is equal to 78. We're not done yet though, because it wants us to find the surface area. So the surface area is 6s squared. So we're going to do 6 times 78 squared. Now you can type that in a calculator, and you should get 36504. And that is the answer, 36504. So this question was not so bad if you knew how to use your calculator and you knew the formulas. But if you didn't know these formulas, you're going to be in big trouble. So I highly recommend you study these. It seems like they're going to be asking about these a bunch. All right, so 10 is 36504. Okay, this is an A times b to the x question. A is your starting or initial amount or your y-intercept, and b is the growth/decay rate. So, so q of 0 equals 14, so that means your initial value is 14. So that means A is equal to 14. Okay, so right away, these two are wrong. They have the wrong A value. And now it says decreases by 48% for every increase in the value of x by 1. So that's telling you that B is a 45% decrease. So B is 45% decrease. So you do, for an increase, you do 1 times 1 plus the decimal. For a decrease, you do times 1 minus the decimal. Okay, so 45% is a decimal. I divide by 100, and I get 0.45. Now I'm going to do 1 minus 0.45 on my calculator, and I get 0.55. So the multiplier is 0.55. So B is 0.55, so this function is 14 times 0.55 to the x. As you can see, D is wrong. Okay, so this would be if you did a 45% increase. So they did it wrong. So you got to read the question carefully. Okay, so the answer is C. Good. All right, this one you could just plot on Desmos and look at it. That's what I would do here, just like I did on the previous question that was like this. I noticed that all these x values are between 0 and 10, so I'm going to do 0 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 10. And I noticed that all of these y values are between 10 and 50. So I'm going to do 10 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 50. Okay, so let's go to Desmos. You could guess and check the points algebraically, but I don't know, that might be a little bit more work. So y is less than 6x plus 2. And then 0 to 10. And then, what did I say? 10 to 50? 10 to 50. All right, that looks really good. So you could just kind of inspect it, or you could plot them if you can't see it. So 3 comma 20 is on a dashed line, so it's not included. So it does not satisfy the inequality. So this one's wrong. Next I'm going to look at 3 comma 16. Okay, 3 comma 16. Okay, that one's in the solution set, so that one's good. Now let's do 3 comma 24. That one's not in the solution set, so that one's no good. Okay, this one's out. Now I'm going to look at 536 and 528. So I look at 536, and I see it's no good. But 528 is good. Okay. So for B, this one's good, but this one is not. Whereas this one's good, but this one is good. And I don't even need to check the last one, plus they're the same anyway. So this one is wrong. And it must be C. So I don't know, wasn't like just making a nice picture and looking at it, wasn't that just much easier than doing all that algebra? I don't know. I thought that was easier. Sure, the only thing that took a little bit of brain power that you need to get used to is you need to be able to look at the graph and find an appropriate window. Because I think making a fixed window made this one a lot easier to look at. So I saw 357. I was like, why don't I make it 0 to 10? And then I saw, okay, the lowest y value is 16 and the highest y value is like 48. So why don't I make it 10 to 50? That was kind of my thought process there. You can do this algebraically by plugging in all these numbers, but honestly, I think that's more difficult, but that's just me. Okay, so you actually can use Desmos to solve this one. So if I graph this, 3x squared plus 20x minus 63, let's do that. So you see, we get -9 and 2.333. Okay, let's check what 2.33333 is. 7 over 3. So we get -9 and 7 over 3 for the x values for the solutions, if it's equal to 0, right? The x-intercepts. So -9 and 7 over 3. Okay, let's write that down. I'll just write it like this. The x-intercepts are -9 and 7 over 3. Now you can solve each of these guys by setting them equal to 0. So remember, the x-intercepts, they should be the solution when you set the factor equal to 0, right? So when we solve these guys, we get x-intercepts of 9 and you plus 7 and then divide by 3 and you get 7 over 3. So this one works because we got 7 over 3, but we didn't get +9, we got -9. So this one does not work. So the answer is 2 only, which is B. Wow, that was really fast, right? I don't really teach the AC method because, as I said, as I just showed you, there are ways to answer pretty much every AC method question, either using the calculator or some other way. I'm going to go through it for this one just because it seems like that's what they want you to do, right? So this is called the AC method. You can give this a Google, look it up on YouTube. So we've got a product of AC. So 3 times -63, which is -189. And we want the two numbers that we think of, to sum to B, which is 20. So you need to now just sit here and brainstorm numbers, brainstorm factors of 189 until you get a product of -189 and a sum of B. So the two numbers that do that, you could guess and check by dividing by 189 to figure out the factors, like 189 divided by 5, 189 divided by 6, 189 divided by 7. The two numbers that do that, this is the hardest part, are 27 and -7. So now we're going to split bx into those terms. So 3x squared plus 27x minus 7x minus 63. And now we factor this guy and we factor this guy. This is called factoring by grouping. So 3x, we take out a 3x and we get x plus 9. And here we take out a -7 and we get x plus 9. So our goal is to factor out the second one in such a way that we get the same thing. So see how we get the same thing here? So that means your two factors are 3x minus 7 and x plus 9. Which, as you can see, 2 is a factor, but Roman numeral 1 is not. Wow, I especially this part, I did it really fast just because I knew what it was, right? Doing this by hand, or this took me a while when I did it organically, right? So this took me like a solid 30 seconds to a minute. And then you had to do the rest of this, which is going to take you another 30 seconds to a minute. Plus this part would probably be like 10 or 15 seconds. So I don't know, this question could take you like 1 to 3 minutes, and if you do it that way. But if you just use Desmos and you know that the x-intercepts are the zeros of the factors, then you can just guess and check and get this question very easily, like in about 30 seconds. So I think that's the best way to do it. So that's why I mentioned that. So yeah, I still have yet to find a digital SAT question where AC method is required to get the answer. So anyway. Okay, so for this one, remember how I was talking about no solution, one solution, infinitely many? For this one, I think it's easiest to do it in standard form. So same slope, different y-intercept, all that stuff. This is the same, but using standard form or pseudo-standard form. So for infinitely many, a over d equals b over e, which equals c over f. For no solution, we have a over d equals b over e, which is not equal to c over f. And then for one solution, all we know is a over d is not equal to b over e. Okay, so what I would do here is I would put both these in standard form. So the top one, I'm going to, or pseudo standard form, I'm going to subtract 9y from both sides, and I get 4x minus 18y equals 5. Now I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides on the bottom one, and I get negative 4x plus hy equals 2. So do you see how, oh, this looks very similar to what Kyle was just talking about, right? So now it says no solution. So that means a over d equals b over e is not equal to c over f. Okay, so this one. So we do that with the number. So the not equal to portion isn't really going to help us, so I'm going to kind of ignore that. Okay, because right, we want to know what's equal to, so we can solve for h, right? So I'm going to write 4 over negative 4 equals negative 18 over h. Now if you cross multiply, you get 4h equals 72 and h equals 18. To me, that was the easiest way to do it. You could put it in slope-intercept form and use the stuff we did before, but then you're probably going to have some fractions, which might be harder to work with. I thought it was easier to just put it in standard form and use this knowledge. Anyway, guess what? Because it's multiple choice, you can do Desmos guess and check as well. So you don't need to know how to do this question to get the answer. So let's do Desmos guess and check. Probably takes about a solid 30 seconds. So really good if you don't know what to do for this one. All right, so 4x minus 9y equals 9y plus 5. And then okay, so let's do h equals negative 9. Okay, that has one solution, so that doesn't have no solution. See how it crosses in the middle here? Now let's do h equals 0. That also has one solution. So that's not right. Okay, let's do h equals 9. That also has one solution. Okay, let's do h equals 18. Oh, they're parallel, so they never cross, so it has no solution. That's the answer. So see, you could have could have done this one probably in about 30 seconds. That was I went slower to show you guys, but probably like 20 or 30 seconds you could have gotten the answer because it's multiple choice. If this were a free response, this would be a much harder question because then you'd pretty much have to do it by hand. But yeah, that's it. So the answer is 18. Desmos really helpful for this one. Really helpful. Okay, I went over this on the other test. So any equation, you can just type it into Desmos and get the answer. So let's do that. So we're going to do y equals left side and y equals right side. So y equals absolute value. There's an absolute value button in the keypad down here. Okay. But to save time, what you can do is you can just use the vertical line button on your keyboard. So to press that, you hold down shift and then you press the button above enter. Okay, so I'm going to do 2, shift, button above enter, 4 minus x, button above enter, plus 3, 4 minus x. Okay, and then I'm going to do y equals 25. And now I'm going to see where they intersect. Okay, so they intersect at x equals -1 and x equals 9. Okay, let's write that down. X equals -1 and x equals 9. Okay, so they want the positive solution. So we go with 9. And that's the answer. It takes about 30 seconds. Yep. What you can do is um, you can also do it by hand. So I went over this exact question earlier in the video. It's on module 2A. Okay. So first you get the absolute value by itself. If the absolute value is negative, there's no solution. If the absolute value is equal to 0, you just drop the bars. Okay. For this one, you see how these guys are the same? So we can combine the like terms. 2 plus 3 is 5, right? So 5, 4 minus x equals 25. Now we divide both sides by 5 and we get 4 minus x equals 5. And then when you have absolute value equals a positive number, like here, you drop the bars, and then you write a second equation where you drop the bars and slap a negative onto the other side. And if you solve both of these, you get -1 and 9. And again, the positive solution is 9. And that's great, but I'm going to be real with you. A good percent of kids wouldn't have known how to do that. But if you know how to type equations into Desmos, you can get the answer very easily. So anyway, so the answer is 9. All right, so for this one, it's a word problem. So a minimum of 200 candles. Okay, so that means the small candles plus the large candles must be greater than or equal to 200. So a minimum of, so that means they're equal to or bigger than 200. And then the prices of the candles, he budgets 2,200. So that means he can at most spend 2,200. So at most is a less than or equal to. And then we put the prices on the other side. So 4.9s plus 11.60 L is less than or equal to 2200. Now I would take these guys and go to Desmos, because solving the system by hand would be a huge pain. So let's go to Desmos. And I'm going to call S, X, and L, Y, okay? So X plus Y less than or greater than or equal to 200. And then 4.90X plus 11.60Y less than or equal to 2200. I'm going to zoom out using my scroll wheel, and then I'm going to zoom in, and you see it intersects here. So the intersection is 17.91 comma 182.09, and it's going down and to the right. Okay, so that means the most optimal purchase is we're gonna go down from 182.99 and to the right of 17.91. So the whole number, he can't buy a decimal number of candles. So the whole number of small candles would be to the right. So bigger. So that would be 18. And then the whole number down. So smaller than 182.09. I wrote that wrong. I'll fix it in a second. Is 182. So this is the optimal purchase of candles. And let's check to make sure it works. So $18 plus $182. Okay, I got $200, which is greater than or equal to $200. And then 4.9 times 18 plus 11.6 times 182. And we get 2199.4. So just barely less than or equal to 2200. So that is definitely so you see but from looking at the picture, because it's down and to the right, okay, that means L is always going to be greater than or equal to 182.09. So the biggest value of L is 182. Anyway, just wanted to show you my full thinking on that. So the maximum number of large candles is 182. Okay, so this is another, we're almost done. This is another y equals a times b to the t over n question. Something you have to realize for these types of questions is that n, the interval, has the same units as t. So for this question, it's basically saying we're starting, A is the starting amount, B is the gross decay rate, N is the interval. So it's basically saying we're starting with $5,470. We're doing some percent decrease every 12. Now, what is the units of X? So that units of X is 12 months. So if I write this equation, 12x equals t, and why don't we call t or why don't we call it y for years or something, right? And then I divide, and then um I solve for x or something. No, it's actually x equals 12y, right? Because 2 years would give us 24 months, right? So I just get y by itself, x over 12 equals y. And now I rewrite the equation, 0.64. Instead of x divided by 12, we just put y. So, and that's how it would be in years, okay? So see how, like, if this were 2, this would be 12 times 2, which would be 24 months. So that makes sense, right? So all you do when you convert the units of an exponential is write an equation and substitute. That's all you got to do. Okay. So you see this new equation in years. Now we use this one. So every year it has a percent multiplier of 0.64. That's a decrease. So for a decrease, the multiplier is 1 minus the decimal. So 0.64 equals 1 minus the decimal. If you solve that equation, you get the decimal is 0.36. And then you turn that into a percent, you multiply by 100. And you get a 36% decrease. And that is the answer. So yeah, you see, like, if this each year thing confuses you, remember what I just taught you. N always has the same units of t. N always has the same units as t. The interval always has the same units of t. So in this one, x was in months. So that meant the 12 was also had units of months. So we had to convert it. Okay, great. We're almost done. All right, this one is great for Desmos guess and check. Why don't we do that first? So f of x, let's do it. F of x equals 9 times 4 to the x. And then g of x equals f of x plus 2. And then I'll just unhighlight the red. And now we're going to plot all these other functions and see which one is the same. Okay, so y equals 18 times 4 to the x. Nope, that's not the same. Okay, let's do y equals 144 times 4 to the x. Ah, that's the same. See, when I turn it on and turn it off, it just replaces it. Oh, I bet B is our answer. Let's check the other ones. 18 times 8 to the x. Nope. And 81 16 to the x. Nope. Okay, so you see the only one that looked the same was B. And I'll do it one more time just to drive this home. And notice how I unshaded the f of x to make that easier to see. Okay, great. All right, so the answer is B. That is the right answer. Okay, so how would we do this by hand? So we have to do g of x equals f of x plus 2. So you're going to replace x with x plus 2. So watch. Instead of 9 times 4 to the x, I'm going to write 9 times 4 to the x plus 2. Now, that would be the correct answer, but for whatever reason, they don't want you to write it like that. So what you can do is you can use your rules of exponents to break this up into 4 to the x times 4 squared, right? Common base you add, so you can similarly, instead of combining them, you can separate them, right? So 4 squared is 16. 9 times 16 is 144, so you get 144 times 4 to the x. So the really tricky part about this one, if you're doing it by hand, which I don't recommend for this one, is you had to break this guy up. You had to break this guy up into this, and that can be really hard to see. Again, if you use the Desmos, it definitely takes less than a minute. So as long as you're good at typing. Okay, great. All right, so for this one, can be done in 2 seconds using the graphing calculator program on the Panda SAT. So x squared minus 2x minus 9, let's pull that up. Some questions the graphing calculator can do better than Desmos. So quadratics. So 1, -2, and then c is -9. You see it says for the answer, roots are 1 plus root 10 and 1 minus root 10. All right, let's go back to the test. So 1 plus or minus root 10. Okay, so it wants us to write it as 1 plus root k. So that means k is 10. That's the answer. Wow, that took 2 seconds. I would be so happy if I saw that question on my test. All right, let's go over how to do it by hand. So a is equal to 1, b is equal to -2, and c is equal to -9. Anytime you see plus or minus a square root in a quadratic problem, they want you to do the quadratic formula. -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we get -2 plus or minus the square root of -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times c, which is -9, over 2 times 1. So if you simplify that, you should get 2 plus or minus root 40 over 2. Now you got to know how to simplify radicals. For this one, the biggest perfect square that goes into 40 is 4, so we write it as root 4 times root 10. Square root of 4 is 2, so this is 2 root 10. Okay, so we get 2 plus or minus 2 root 10 over 2. And now we're going to split the fraction using the butterfly or the heart. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and then 2 root 10 divided by 2 is root 10. And you still get k equals 10. But man, wasn't that a lot more work? And I feel like a lot of kids would have messed this up. Anyway, I highly recommend you get a calculator program that can give it to you, not just a decimal, that can give it to you in the square root form, because they're never going to have you do the decimal on the SAT. They want it in the square root form. Okay, great. Number 20, we're almost done. So first thing you got to do is distribute. So this is kx squared minus 56x equals -16. Now it's a quadratic, so we have to get all the terms to one side. Kx squared minus 56x plus 16, so we add 16 to both sides. And now we need to use the discriminant. So I went over this in the last video. Really quickly to sum up, discriminant d equals b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so when d is less than 0, there's no real solutions. When d is equal to 0, there's one real solution. And when d is greater than 0, there's 2 real solution. Okay, so if you don't know this, you might want to pause this video for a second and write this down. Okay, so I'll put it on the screen for like 2 seconds and you can pause it. All right. So A is equal to K, B is equal to minus 56, and C is equal to 16. So now we plug all those things in. So D is equal to B squared minus 4AC. So B squared, negative 56 squared, that's 3,136. Just use your calculator. Minus 4AC. So minus 4A is K, and then C is 16. So this gives you 3136 minus 4 times 16 is 64. So minus 64K. And it says no real solution. So that means the discriminant is less than 0. So we're going to put less than 0, and now we're going to solve this inequality. We add 64K to both sides, and we get 3136 is less than 64K. Now I'm going to flip it. So 64K is greater than 3136. And now I'm going to divide both sides by 64. And we get K is greater than 49. So now you might be wondering, what the heck? What do I put as my answer? 49.0001, blah, 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 blah. Well, I missed this at first too. You might have missed this. It says K is an integer constant. So integers are anything that's on the number line. So -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. It's basically any whole number that's positive, negative, or 0. Okay. So if K is greater than 49, well, K cannot be equal to 49. So we can't use 49. So we need to use the next biggest one that satisfies it to find the minimum value of K, which is 50. So 50 is greater than 49. And that's your final answer, 50. Yeah, you could also plot this just to verify, but again, Desmos doesn't really help with this one. You have to do this one by hand. All right, so you got to use the discriminant for this one. Really got to know that. Okay, 21. So hourly fee for each additional hour. So this is a linear function, and they tell us after the first 2 hours it's $200. Okay, so that means 2 comma 200 is a point. Time is almost always your independent variable. So and it's 2 comma 220, sorry. And then it says for 5 hours the cost is $400. Okay, so we got 2 points. We got to find the equation of line. For this one, I would just go straight to the graphing calculator. I highly recommend you either get the Panda SAT program or some program that can take 2 points and spit out the equation of the line. So I'm going to go to lines. And I'm going to go to 2 points, and I'm going to type in 2, 220, and then I'm going to type in 5, 400. And it tells me y equals 60x plus 100. Wow, that was really helpful. Okay, so y equals 60x plus 100. And that is A. So you definitely want to know how to do this by hand because they could ask you a conceptual question. I'm going to just delete some of this stuff from before, if that's okay. Let me just do that really quick. Okay, so whenever you have the find the equation of line from 2 points and you don't have the slope or the y-intercept, the first thing you do is calculate the slope using y2 minus y1. So 400 minus 220 over 5 minus 2. So the slope is 180 over 3, which is 60. Then you write the partial equation. So y equals 60x plus b. Then you plug in a point and solve for b, whichever one. I'm going to go with the second one just because I don't like the 220. I think that might make the arithmetic harder. So 400 equals 60 times 5 plus b. We solve for b. 60 times 5 is 300. Subtract 300 from both sides, and we get b equals 100. And now we just write the equation. So m is 60, b is 100. So we write mx plus b, so 60x plus 100. Again, like, I just think, yeah, the graphing calculator just saves you so much time on this question. So yeah, you really should review that and know how to do that. Okay, last one, probably the hardest question on the test. Okay, so first you need to understand that all of these values are integers, and you see how it says greater than or equal to 10, but less than 20. Okay, so like this box, for example, only has numbers greater than or equal to 10, but less than 20. And then the one to the right of that would be greater than or equal to 20, but less than 30, et cetera, et cetera. So for that leftmost box, for example, or leftmost grid space, and they're all integers, right? So the possible values in that box, in that grid space, are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. You can't have 20. The next box has 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. The next grid has 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. So you see how the number that's on the right does not get included, okay? But the number that's on the left in the box does. Okay, so first you got to understand that. Then you got to understand that they're all integers because it says integers, right? So they're all whole numbers. Okay. So very first thing I always do when I see a histogram is I label the frequencies. So this one is 3, this one is 4, this one is 7, this one is 9. And then this one is 3, this one is 4, this one is 7, this one is 9. And now it wants us to find the smallest possible difference. So first you have to recognize, see how B is shifted to the left? See how it has smaller numbers? It has 10s and 20s when this one doesn't. So that means that the mean of A is greater than the mean of B. That's the first thing you have to realize. Now, the question is, how do we find the smallest possible difference? Well, let's look at an example. So let's say I have two numbers. Let's call them C and D. And C is between 3 and 6, and D is between 8 and 10. And they're all whole numbers, okay? So the biggest possible difference would be 10 minus 3, which is 7. The smallest possible difference would be 8 minus 6, which is 2. So we want to find the smallest possible difference. So what did we do to find the smallest possible difference? Well, we took the smallest of the big number, and then we took the biggest of the small number. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. Okay, so we're going to, the bigger number is A. So we're going to minimize the mean of A, and we're going to maximize the bigger number. So we're going to maximize the mean of B. So to minimize the mean of A, we're going to put the smallest possible value in every box. So this one is 20. The smallest possible value here is 30. Smallest possible value is 40. And the smallest possible value is 50. Okay. Now to maximize B, we're going to do the biggest possible value in each box. So remember, we don't include the 20. The biggest possible value is 19. So we're going to do 19, 29, 39, and 49. Now you have to, the old-fashioned way, find the mean of each of these. So what you do is, for a histogram or a frequency table, you do sum divided by n. So n is just 23, okay? So the bottom is 23. And then to find the sum, you multiply them together and add. So 3 times 20 plus 4 times 30. You see what I'm doing? Plus 7 times 40. Plus, and just give me 1 second, because I want to be able to show you guys this whole thing. Let me just move this over to the right so I have more space here. Plus, what is it? 7 times 40, and then 9 times 50. So if you type that all in your calculator very carefully, you should get 910 over 23. Now we're going to do the same thing for mean B. So we divide by the total number, right? That's how you find mean, which is 23. And then 3 times 19 plus 4 times 29 plus 7 times 39 plus 9 times 49. So we're going to do that on the calculator now. Hopefully I wrote that all out correctly. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And you should get 887 over 23. So now the difference, the smallest possible difference, is 910 over 23 minus 8, what did I say? 887 over 23, which is 23 over 23, which is just 1. Wow, that was a lot of work. But again, like, B is 1. So this is a hard question, but you can spend more time on this question, especially if you're using Desmos, because you're saving time from the other questions, right? You're saving lots of time from the other questions. So you don't have to do this one in a minute or two. Hopefully, if you're doing the other questions in quickly, you'll have at least like 4 minutes to spend on this one. So you can try to figure it out. So I think the important thing was you guys kind of understand what I did in this example. So to find the smallest possible difference, we found the smallest number of the big number and the biggest number of the small number. And then to find the maximum difference, I could totally see that being a future question. We did the biggest possible of the big number and the smallest possible of the small number so that they're more spread out. So you see we use the inside for the smallest difference and we use the outside for the biggest difference. Okay, this concludes module 2B. Time for the outro. Okay, everyone, that completes the walkthrough for this exam. I hope you found my video helpful. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I will be posting solutions to every single digital SAT math question, as well as every single digital PSAT math question. If you are interested in my tutoring services, the link to my website will be in the description. I tutor all sections of the SAT and all math subjects from 7th grade to about AP/early college level. Thanks for stopping by and good luck studying.